For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by the direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 707 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 44, House Resolution 707. Resolved that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House any bill specified in Section 2 of this resolution. All points of order against consideration of each such bill are waived. Respective amendments in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee print specified in Section 3 of this resolution shall be considered as adopted. Each such bill as amended shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in each such bill as amended are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on each such bill as amended and on any further amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform or their respective designees, and 2, 1 motion to recommit. Section 2. The bills referred to in the first section of this resolution are as follows. A, the bill, H.R. 4922, to limit youth offender status in the District of Columbia to individuals 18 years of age or younger, to direct the Attorney General of the District of Columbia to establish and operate a publicly accessible website containing updated statistics on juvenile crime in the District of Columbia, to amend the District of Columbia Home Rule Act to prohibit the Council of the District of Columbia from enacting changes to existing criminal liability sentences and for other purposes. B, the bill, H.R. 5143, to establish standards for law enforcement officers in the District of Columbia to engage in vehicular pursuits of suspects and for other purposes. C, the bill, H.R. 5140, to lower the age at which a minor may be tried as an adult for certain criminal offenses in the District of Columbia to 14 years of age. D, the bill, H.R. 5125, to amend the District of Columbia Home Rule Act to terminate the District of Columbia Judicial Nomination Commission and for other purposes. Section 3. The Rules Committee prints referred to in the first section of this resolution are as follows. A, with respect to H.R. 4922, Rules Committee print 119-10. B, with respect to H.R. 5143, Rules Committee print 119-11. C, with respect to H.R. 5140, Rules Committee print 119-12. D, with respect to H.R. 5125, Rules Committee print 119-13. Section 4. Upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 1047 to require the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to reform the interconnection queue process for the prioritization and approval of certain projects and for other purposes. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived in lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Energy and Commerce, now printed in the bill as an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee print 119-9 shall be considered as adopted. The bill as amended shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill as amended are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill as amended and on any further amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce or their respective designees, and 2, 1 motion to recommit. Section 5. Upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 3015 to reestablish the National Coal Council in the Department of Energy to provide advice and recommendations to the Secretary of Energy on matters related to coal and the coal industry and for other purposes. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Energy and Commerce, now printed in the bill, shall be considered as adopted. The bill as amended shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill as amended are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill as amended and on any further amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one. 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce or their respective designees, and 2, 1 motion to recommit. Section 6. Upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 3062 to establish a more uniform, transparent, and modern process to authorize the construction, connection, operation, and maintenance of international border crossing facilities for the import and export of oil and natural gas and the transmission of electricity. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Energy and Commerce, now printed in the bill, shall be considered as adopted. The bill as amended shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill as amended are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill as amended and on any further amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one. 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce or their respective designees, and 2, 1 motion to recommit. Section 7. In the engrossment of the bill H.R. 3633, to provide for a system of regulation of the offer and sale of digital commodities by the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and for other purposes. The clerk shall, A, add the text of the bill H.R. 1919 to amend the Federal Reserve Act to prohibit the Federal Reserve banks from offering certain products or services directly to an individual, to prohibit the use of central bank digital currency for monetary policy and for other purposes, as passed by the House as new matter at the end of H.R. 3633. B, conform the title of H.R. 3633 to reflect the addition of H.R. 1919 as passed by the House to the engrossment. C, assign appropriate designations to provisions within the engrossment. D, conform cross-references and provisions for short titles within the engrossment. And E, be authorized to make technical corrections to include corrections in spelling, punctuation, page and line numbering, section numbering, and insertion of appropriate headings. Section 8. Section 5 of House Resolution 354, agreed to April 29, 2025, is amended by striking September 30th, 2025, and inserting March 31, 2026. Section 9. Section 2 of House Resolution 313, agreed to April 9, 2025, is amended by striking September 30th, 2025, and inserting March 31, 2026. Section 10. Section 4 of House Resolution 211, agreed to March 11th, 2025, is amended by striking for the remainder of the first session of the 119th Congress and inserting during the period from March 11, 2025 through March 31, 2026. Section 11. The provisions of Section 202 of the National Emergency Act 50 U.S.C. 1622 shall not apply during the period from September 16, 2025 through March 31, 2026 to a joint resolution terminating the national emergency declared by the President on July 30, 2025.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 hour.
For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
House Resolution 707 provides for consideration of 7 measures. The rule provides for consideration of H.R. 4922, H.R. 5140, H.R. 5143, and H.R. 5125 under closed rules, with 1 hour of debate each, equally divided and controlled by the chair and the ranking member of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform or their respective designees. The rule provides for each bill with 1 motion to recommit. The rule also provides for consideration of H.R. 3015, H.R. 3062, and H.R. 1047 under closed rules, with 1 hour of debate each, equally divided and controlled by the chair and the ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce or their designees. The rule provides each bill with one motion to recommit. The rule also provides that in the engrossment of H.R. 3633, the clerk shall add the text of H.R. 1919 as passed by the House as a new matter at the end of H.R. 3633. Further, the rule tolls the day counts regarding resolutions of inquiry until March 31, 2025. Finally, the rule tolls the day counts until March 31, 2025 regarding joint resolutions, terminating the national emergencies declared by President on February 1, 2025, April 2, 2025, and July 30, 2025. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this rule and in support of the underlying legislation. The rule before us provides an opportunity for Congress to reverse the disastrous energy and crime policies left behind by the previous administration and restore accountability where needed the most. For far too long, the American people have been forced to live under a regulatory agenda that drove up costs, weakened our grid, and made our communities less safe. These measures begin to roll back that damage and put us on a stronger and safer trajectory. To restore accountability in our energy policies, this rule provides for consideration of H.R. 3015, the National Coal Council Reestablishment Act. This legislation permanently restores the National Coal Council, an advisory body for nearly 4 decades, provided expert recommendations on matters affecting the American coal sector. Established in 1984, the Council delivered 40 reports to the Secretary of Energy on coal markets, research and development into clean coal technologies, and regulatory barriers that affect the coal industry. But in 2021, at the behest of left-wing organizations, the Biden administration disregarded this history and disbanded the council, replacing it with an advisory body charged with fulfilling the left's Green New Deal agenda. Make no mistake, this was not about policy, it was about shutting coal out of the conversation, an essential piece of our nation's energy matrix. The United States is home to the world's largest coal reserves, with approximately 440 years' worth of supply at current production levels. Today, our fleet of over 400 coal-fired power plants provides 16% of America's electricity. And in 5 states, coal provides more than half. In 17 states, it provides more than 20%. Together, the coal industry supports hundreds of thousands of jobs, lifts up small communities across the country, and provides affordable and reliable baseload power that helps keep prices stable. Premature retirements of coal plants are being driven by federal and state policies that intentionally attack their financial viability. Yet the demand for electricity is only going up. Since 2022, the retirement of 29,000 megawatts of coal capacity has been delayed because of rising demand and insufficient replacement resources. To put it bluntly, removing coal from the grid at this moment in time would lead to higher costs and greater instability for families and businesses. This is a reality that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle refuse to acknowledge. And in New York, we're already seeing what these anti-energy radical policies have done, shutting down production of reliable baseload power in favor of pursuing unrealistic and dangerous green agenda items. Now, despite widespread public opposition, my governor, Kathy Hochul, and Albany Democrats are moving forward with a ban on natural gas and propane hookups in new construction starting in 2026. That means families in Western New York, where winters are long, snow is great, and it's cold and oftentimes dangerous in these terrible winter storms. They will be denied the ability to choose the energy source that best keeps them safe and warm in their homes. Taking affordable and reliable options off the table is not sound policy. It's assaults like this on consumer choice, on the freedom to use reliable, affordable energy like coal and natural gas that leave people more vulnerable when the power goes out. And that's why it matters who is at the table. And when it comes to energy policy, this measure makes the National Coal Council permanent, so future administrations can't simply shut it down for political reasons. H.R. 3015 also reinforces President Trump's April 8, 2025 executive order to reinvigorate America's clean coal industry, recognizing that coal must remain part of our energy future if we want to ensure future prosperity, meet rising electricity demand, and lower costs for families. By reestablishing the National Coal Council, Congress will ensure that reliable, affordable baseload power remains a cornerstone of our energy policy while supporting family-sustaining jobs and fueling next-generation industries like AI. The rule also provides for consideration of H.R. 3062, the Promoting Cross-Border Energy Infrastructure Act. This measure creates a transparent and permanent framework for permitting pipelines and other cross-border energy projects. For years, developers have been subject to political gamesmanship and destroyed investments and stranded jobs. The cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline was not based on science. It was simply based on politics. The Biden administration sided with radical activists over American workers and energy security for our country. We have seen the same story play out in my own state of New York. The Northern Access Pipeline was a major natural gas infrastructure project that promised thousands of good-paying jobs, more affordable energy for families across the northeastern United States, and new tax revenue for rural communities like mine in the southern tier. But instead of moving forward, that project was tied up with endless red tape and obstructed by state regulators. Western New York and the southern tier in New York lost jobs, investment, and energy security that would have come from it. A project that should have been supported by large construction workforces and strengthened our region was derailed again because of politics. And that's exactly why permitting reform is needed, and it's needed now. Without certainty, projects like this will continue to slip away, taking good jobs and economic growth with them. Energy developers, workers, and communities all deserve better. Yet when it comes to the permitting reforms that would actually allow critical energy projects to move forward, Democrats have consistently acquiesced to the demands of radical environmental groups instead of the needs of American workers and families. The result is higher costs and fewer options for American families. And this legislation cuts through that red tape. It gives developers certainty and it ensures critical projects can move forward. In addition, the rule includes H.R. 1047, the Guaranteeing Reliability Through the Interconnection of Dispatchable Power Act. Year after year, projects that would keep the lights on, lower bills, they're stuck in the interconnection queues, regulatory wait lists, and sometimes as long as 7 years they're stuck there. That is simply unacceptable. Families do not care about bureaucratic excuses. They care about whether their homes are heated in the winter and cooled in the summer. This legislation cuts through that backlog. It empowers grid operators to prioritize projects that actually enhance reliability. And let us be clear about how we got here. Democrats have spent years forcing premature retirements of coal, nuclear, and natural gas through excessive regulation while shoveling subsidies to wind and solar. The result is interconnection queues flooded with projects that only have a 5% completion rate. Meanwhile, Democrat policies have left ratepayers footing the bill for two grids. One grid props up wind and solar with massive transmission costs. The other is the backup power we all rely on when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing. This measure puts reliability first. It follows the lead of major grid operators who know the danger of relying too heavily on intermittent sources. And it makes sure that the grid is strong enough not only to keep the lights on at home, but also to power next-generation industries like AI and manufacturing. So America, not China, leads the future. Mr. Speaker, energy security is, simply put, national security. And the rule before us takes important steps to keep power reliable, affordable, and American-made. But security is not just about the strength of our grid. It's also about the safety of our communities. And nowhere is that failure of safety more visible than right here in our nation's capital. While Washington should be a place that is showcased as what is the very best of America, it has instead become a city struggling with violent crime, juvenile offenses, and weakened law enforcement. The next measures in this rule take direct aim at those failures and restore accountability where the D.C. Council has refused to act. The rule also provides for consideration of H.R. 4922, the D.C. Crimes Act of 2025. This legislation reasserts congressional oversight over the district by prohibiting the D.C. Council from further pursuing its progressive soft-on-crime sentencing guidelines. The Council has failed to keep residents and visitors from our country and from around the world safe. Even as violent crime has soared, police staffing has dropped to a 50-year low. This measure takes direct aim at the Council's reckless decisions. It lowers the definition of a youth offender from under 25 to under 18, where it belongs, so that adults are simply treated as adults. It ends judicial discretion that allows juvenile violent offenders to escape mandatory minimums, and it prohibits the Council from weakening mandatory minimums on sentencing guidelines any further. Now, make no mistake, carjackings and robberies by juveniles, they're out of control. More than 500 minors were arrested for robbery in 2023, and more carjackings were committed by juveniles. Every American should be able to visit their nation's capital without fear of being the next victim. We all know too well what happens when local leaders choose leniency over accountability. In my home state of New York, cashless bail has unleashed a wave of tragic and entirely preventable outcomes. Governor Hochul and Democrats have doubled down on pro-criminal policies that put violent offenders back on our streets, leaving families and communities to suffer the consequences. The American people deserve better. New Yorkers deserve better. People in Washington, D.C. deserve better, and President Trump has already stepped in to end cashless bail here in Washington. And it's long past time for New York to follow that lead. The rule also provides for consideration of H.R. 5140, the District of Columbia Juvenile Sentencing Reform Act. Since the pandemic, juvenile crime has surged. More than 2,000 juveniles were arrested in both 2023 and 2024. According to the Metropolitan Police Department, over half of robbery arrests last year were juveniles. And as of this year, juveniles account for more than half of carjacking arrests. This legislation responds to that reality. Current law allows juveniles 16 and older to be tried as adults for violent crimes. This measure lowers that age to 14. These are not youthful mistakes. They are violent, life-altering crimes. Consider the tragic example of Muhammad Anwar, a hardworking immigrant killed in 2021 by two teenage girls during a carjacking. Both will be back on the streets by the age of 21. In July of 2023, another Lyft driver who previously served as an interpreter for the U.S. military in Afghanistan was fatally shot while driving. The teen responsible, just 14 years old. They were sentenced to only 3 years of secure detention. Old enough to commit horrific and senseless murder, yet he will be back on the streets in just 3 years. Now let me be clear, this legislation applies only to violent crimes: murder, first-degree sexual abuse, burglary in the first degree, and robbery while armed. These are serious offenses that endanger residents and visitors to our nation's capital every day. They demand serious consequences to truly restore law and order. The rule further provides for consideration of H.R. 5413, the District of Columbia Policing Protection Act. In 2023, the Council imposed a set of restrictions that require officers to evaluate a checklist of 14 factors to decide whether to pursue a fleeing suspect. One of those factors even requires an officer to determine whether anyone in the suspect's car had a chance to surrender a weapon. That's absurd. Officers rarely have time or information to work through such a checklist when a suspect takes off. This legislation repeals those restrictions and restores discretion to trained officers. It allows pursuit when an officer or supervisor determines it is necessary, the most effective means of apprehension, and does not present an unreasonable risk to bystanders. Officers must be able to act quickly to protect lives, and this measure restores that authority. And finally, the rule provides for consideration of H.R. 5125, the District of Columbia Judicial Nominations Reform Act. The Judicial Nomination Commission currently limits President Trump's choices for D.C. judges to a very narrow list of names. That process is slow, it's politicized, and it's very likely unconstitutional under the Appointments Clause. The result has been persistent vacancies, clogged courts, and criminals slipping through the cracks. This legislation abolishes the commission and it restores normal constitutional processes. The President nominates, the Senate confirms. That is how it works everywhere else in America, and that's how it should work right here in D.C. A duly elected president should not be bound by a bureaucratic commission when choosing judges. By ending this broken system, we can fill vacancies faster, strengthen courts, and ensure justice is delivered without delay. Mr. Speaker, Democrats' soft-on-crime policies have failed in D.C., just as they've failed in states like New York. These bills hold the line. They restore accountability, and they put public safety ahead of politics. I urge my colleagues to support this rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from New York for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we just heard a whole lot of words from the gentleman in New York, but the bills before us today are yet another example of how backwards Republican priorities are and how they are hurting this country, hurting the economic well-being of the people I represent, hurting the economic well-being of working people all over this country. People are stressed about their budgets. They're worried about prices going up. They're scared they might lose their jobs. People are struggling to pay the bills and make ends meet, worried about saving for college for their kids and how they're going to deal with the exploding cost of health care. And instead of addressing any of that, we're dealing with this. And when we're not dealing with this, Republicans are obsessed with fighting culture wars. That's what they want, 24/7, culture wars, culture wars, culture wars. Some of them are now proposing a new committee to investigate their political opponents, a new House Un-American Activities Committee that would make Joe McCarthy blush. That's all this place is to Republicans, a venue for culture wars, a venue for legislation to further divide people and divide this country. Meanwhile, they do nothing, absolutely nothing, for everyday people, nothing at all. Actually, it's worse than nothing. They're actively trying to screw over regular people. Look no further than yesterday. Democrats tried to force a vote on Trump's tariffs, and nearly every Republican blocked it. Every one of them is now on record as supporting Trump's disaster of tariffs. They're not just ignoring the economy, they're making it worse. But for the other side, this is all about genuflecting to Donald Trump. It's all about power for the sake of power. It's not about the American people. It's never been about the American people for these guys. It's about power. And they use that power to help the rich, the well-connected, and the well-off. 4 of these bills that we're going to be dealing with are about local issues in Washington, D.C., something none of my constituents have ever asked me about. For the record, 0.2% of the U.S. population lives in Washington, D.C. And Republicans want to get into the weeds about their local policing policies. You know what my constituents ask me about? They don't ask me about local issues that affect Washington, D.C. They ask me about why their health care insurance premiums are going up. They ask me about prices going up because of Donald Trump's tariffs. They tell me they need more money in their pockets to make ends meet. Yet week after week after week after week, Republicans do nothing about health care, nothing about inflation. It's constant culture wars. It's constant giveaways to the rich and powerful. It's constant distractions. One of the Republican bills that we're considering today reestablishes a coal council. Not even establishes, reestablishes. Wow, that's really important. A coal council. Who the hell asked for that? A coal lobbyist? I mean, oh, and by the way, the Department of Energy already reestablished this stupid council months ago. It's apparently so important that President Trump hasn't even bothered to appoint anyone to it yet. I mean, if you look up their website, he still hasn't appointed anybody to the council. Go to the website. I mean, this is stupid. We are wasting time by doing this. Energy prices are going up in this country. And this is the response? Reestablishing a coal council? I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is laughable. And the other bills Republicans are bringing forward today are giveaways to polluters who dump toxic chemicals into our air and into our water. And why? Follow the money. Follow the money. I mean, did the CEO of ExxonMobil call Donald Trump and ask for a favor? Mr. Speaker, all of these bills are a disgrace. The people we represent want us to address the real issues we face every day. They want us to talk about the cost of living, about health care, about fixing what's broken with this country's economic system. And meanwhile, as we're gathering here doing this stuff, the clock is ticking toward a shutdown. Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House. They should be able to fund the government, but they won't. Now, let me be clear. Democrats are not going to stand by and do nothing while these guys try to kick millions of people off their health care. And I hear that the Speaker of the House is saying, oh, it's no big deal. Oh, we'll just kick the can down the road. We'll deal with it sometime, maybe in December. We'll talk about it then. Well, let me be clear, and I will speak in C-spot run language so my Republican colleagues can understand. Mr. Speaker, the CBO, that's the Congressional Budget Office, says 1.5 million people, and that's a lot of people, will lose their health care if we wait. People's premiums, and that's their monthly payments, will go way, way up because the insurance companies are making important decisions right now about how much to charge. So we do not have time to wait. Now, okay, now that that's clear, Mr. Speaker, Republicans have three choices. First, they can work with us in a bipartisan way to make sure it doesn't happen. Second, they can do what Trump said and pass a CR alone since they control government. Or third, they can choose to shut the government down. Those are the three options. Democrats, well, we're for keeping the government open, but we are not for passing legislation that tells millions of people we represent, including sick people, good luck, you're on your own, best wishes. We're not for that. We are not for that. So if there is a shutdown, I would just say to Republicans, you guys own this. It's your shutdown, and if you would rather shut down the government than protect people's health care, then we do not share the same values. I want to keep people on health care, not kick them off. You know, I go home and I ask people what they care about. I go to coffee shops and county fairs. I hold town halls, something Republicans should try to do, by the way. And you know what I hear from my constituents? They are sick and tired of those at the top getting ahead while they struggle to pay their bills. They're sick and tired of Republicans in Congress passing bills to help the rich while everyone else has to breathe in dirty air and drink dirty water. They are sick and tired of this culture war garbage and this weird obsession that Republicans have with micromanaging Washington, D.C. They want Republicans to leave Washington, D.C. the hell alone and focus on their own damn communities. They are sick and tired of Republicans trying to kick people off their health care while they're to pay for taxes for multimillionaires and billionaires. These are rotten bills. And to top it all off, we have 7 more completely closed rules with no amendments allowed. Take it or leave it from this Republican majority. I think we ought to leave it. These are terrible bills that are going to hurt people we represent. I urge a no vote, and I reserve my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they love to talk about affordability. They love to play class warfare. But if Democrats were serious about lowering costs for working families, then they wouldn't have spent the last 4 years driving energy prices higher with more regulations, higher taxes, and subsidies that pick winners and losers. Families have felt the pain every time they fill up their gas tank. They pay their rising utility bills or try to keep the lights on in their small business. Republicans, working with President Trump, are focused on real solutions. Restoring energy policy that unleashes production here at home, secures our grid, delivers reliable, affordable power that families and businesses can count on, and it creates jobs in the process. And that's exactly what this rule is about. The three energy bills before us are straightforward. They support family-sustaining energy jobs. They're streamlining approvals for cross-border infrastructure and ensuring reliable and dispatchable generation for the grid. Together, they mean lower bills for families, stronger supply chains, and a more competitive America. So when Democrats talk about affordability, they don't have a leg to stand on in this fight because it's their assault on the American energy industry that led to so much of the inflation that this country suffered under for the last 5 years. The answer is right here in the rule, and we need to support this legislation, and I strongly support the legislation and encourage my colleagues to do the same. But, you know, I want to touch on the gentleman's comments on tariffs. Republicans are doing what Democrats for generations promised the American people that they would do, but they utterly failed. Ensuring fair trade, protecting American workers, and bringing countries to the negotiating table in the process. For years, Democrats sold a bill of goods to working-class Americans while they turned a blind eye as their factories closed and their jobs were shipped overseas. Now, today, they claim to be the party of working families, and we know that's not the case. Yet it's President Trump, over the Democrats' loud objections, who is fighting for fair trade deals for our working families, like the working families in New York's 23rd Congressional District. Access to the American economy is a privilege, not a right. President Trump is using tariffs as leverage to reduce reciprocal barriers, safeguard our national security, and level the global playing field for American producers and manufacturers. And it's working. Treasury has already collected more than $29 billion in tariff revenue this year, while countries like India, China, and South Korea are at the table negotiating new deals as we speak. This is the same decisive leadership that secured stronger trade agreements with the EU, with Japan, with the UK, and partners across Asia. These aren't trade wars. They are trade wins that deliver more jobs, higher wages, and greater opportunities for American families and American products around the world. And Mr. Speaker, the same focus on protecting working families is exactly what we're doing with the bills before us today. This rule advances common sense legislation to strengthen our grid, to unleash American energy, and restore coal's role in the mix. Also, let's not underplay what it means to protect the people of Washington, D.C., which we do have a federal oversight responsibility for, and having a crime-ridden nation's capital is unacceptable by any metric. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields.
Reserve the remainder
The gentleman
of my time.
reserves his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Republicans are protecting American families, my foot. You just passed this big, ugly bill that throws millions of people off of health care, that gives tax breaks to multimillionaires and billionaires. And then you accuse us of playing, class warfare because we're trying to stick up for the middle class in this country, for working families. But it's not, but you can't call it class warfare when you're giving tax breaks to multimillionaires and billionaires while cutting people's health care benefits. And let me just say for the record that in the gentleman's district, in New York District 23, as of 2024, 6,000 people in your district receive tax credits to help lower their monthly premium payments to make quality, comprehensive health insurance coverage more affordable. And these tax cuts are going to, these tax credits are going to expire. These people are going to lose their health care, or they're going to see their premiums go through the roof. For a 60-year-old couple earning $82,800 a year in the gentleman's district, annual premiums would increase by $7,349. That's a 110% increase. For a family of four earning $129,800 a year, ages 45 and up, an annual premium increase would increase by $70,741. That's a 172% increase. For a family of four earning $64,000 a year, annual premiums would increase by $2,571. That's a 369% increase. I don't know. I guess in your district, your constituents don't care about that. According to you, they care more about micromanaging D.C. But I'll tell you, in my district and in every other district that I know of in this country, people are worried about their health care costs. And we ought to do something about it, not kick the can down the road so more and more people end up feeling the pain. And Mr. Speaker, I'm going to urge that we defeat the previous question. And I will offer an amendment to the rule to strike sections 9, 10, and 11, which together block privileged consideration of measures ending the administration's global tariffs and tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and Brazil until March 31st, 2026. Mr. Speaker, President Trump made a campaign promise that he would lower prices, quote, on day one, yet Trump's disastrous trade war continues to increase the prices Americans are paying for food, for gas, and for other everyday goods. And according to independent estimates, Trump's current tariff regime is resulting in a $2,300 tax increase in 2025 alone for the average American household. Fruits, vegetables, beef, and coffee are just some of the products experiencing the highest price increases. Go to a supermarket, for heaven's sakes, in your district, and you'll know what I'm talking about. This is not what the American people voted for. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit recently held that Trump's tariffs that he imposed under the guise of bogus emergencies are unlawful, and that Congress, not the President, must make the calls when it comes to imposing new tariffs. Now, as we await the Supreme Court's decision, Congress should be voting on these tariffs and whether they should remain in place. But in the Republican rule, they are again blocking the Congress from taking a vote on whether we should keep or remove these emergency tariffs. The President imposed huge tariffs on Canada and Mexico in February, global tariffs in April, and most recently a 50% tariff on Brazil because he didn't like that his friend, Brazil's disgraced former president, was just tried and convicted of trying to overthrow a democratic election to stay in power. Mr. Speaker, does that remind you of anyone, by the way? But the American people paid $30 billion in new tariff taxes in August alone, and Republicans are continuing to hide their heads in the sand. And Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment into the record along with any extraneous materials immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection.
I mean, for God's sake, we ought to do our work. We ought to live up to our constitutional responsibility and debate and vote on these things. I'm sorry that the President has instructed you to do nothing, but we ought to do something. Mr. Speaker, to discuss our proposal, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from New York, the distinguished ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Meeks.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. I want to thank you for your continuing leadership on the Rules Committee. I want to thank you for your leadership in the People's House. And I want to thank you for always putting the working American first. I heard my colleague said he's proud of the tariffs. Well, we need to do one thing. Let's vote on it. Let's vote. That's how you'll see where we are. Vote on it. Let it go on the floor. Let's review the tape from the past year. President Trump has declared bogus international emergencies as a pretext to tax imports from Canada, Mexico, and then the whole world, passing these costs right to the hard-working American people. And that's because he wanted to protect his friend, as Mr. McGovern said, former President Bolsonaro. He then announced another pseudo-emergency to impose yet more tariffs on Brazil. The law that Donald Trump is using for tariffs on everyday consumer goods was in fact meant to respond to actual global emergencies, not personal vendettas. And that's why Congress reserved power under the law to author privileged resolutions to end any fake emergencies used to grab Congress's power to tax. So I asked my colleague from New York, let's vote on it. Why block a vote on the floor to see where members of the House stand? Just as multiple courts have now found, Trump's tariffs are illegal. The House is also acting in contravention of the spirit of the law by avoiding votes instead of having votes, like to vote on my privileged resolutions to end these unjustified tariffs that harm Americans. We can vote on it. Speaker Johnson is doing this literally by declaring again that a day is not a day for the purposes of the international emergency law. A day is not a day. Well, he's just doing what the other speaker, the guy who's the president, but he's acting as speaker, doing what he's told. This game playing is not the norm. You know, actually, just across the Capitol, the Republican Senate, they are taking votes on similar resolutions that have been offered. The Senate voted in a bipartisan way to end the Canada emergency. But Speaker Johnson, he's refusing to allow that to happen. The House should have a say. Even last Congress, the Republican majority had votes on privilege resolutions under the emergency law. I can understand why some of my colleagues across the aisle might wish to avoid such a vote. They don't want to see raising taxes and increasing costs on everyday families in this country, but their inaction is doing just that, letting Donald Trump's fake emergencies and tariffs continue unchecked. So let me propose a solution. Do your job. The American people elected us to take those tough votes. It's our time. The cameras of history are rolling, and what they are going to see is the Republican majority shying away from the spotlight.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Vote no on this rule. And I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, let's set the record straight. There's a lot to unpack there and a lot of talk about playing games. But what my colleagues on the other side of the aisle refuse to admit is how, during the COVID-19 pandemic, they had intentionally passed premium tax credits with a sunset, allowing them to expire, and in the process playing politics with the health care of millions of Americans. And if Democrats truly supported these credits, as they claim they now do, in being made permanent, they would have made them permanent when they controlled both chambers of Congress and the White House. It would have been suggested by President Biden when he was in the White House that that should have been a priority of the Congress. They refused to do so. They never brought that up. Mr. Speaker, this is a pattern with Democrats. They would rather use working families for their political means and ends than genuinely work to make their lives better. And the American people see that for what it is. You're hearing the sky is falling, everyone's going to lose their health care if this is not attached to a CR at this moment. Yes, we do have the majority, and I'm confident we'll pass a CR in the House. But you know darn well that in the Senate, that Leader Schumer will hold the majority hostage, using the filibuster to force us into a shutdown, just like they threatened to do in March. I mean, that's the tactic that's being played. You hear all these expectations being set by the other side, knowing that they have a trapdoor, and they intend to try to leverage the American people to get more of their political will accomplished. Republicans already voted to deliver lower premiums for patients by passing H.R. 1, which targeted waste, fraud, and abuse across the ACA marketplace. Democrats unanimously oppose this bill, showing once again they're not serious about solving affordability problems for everyday Americans, just like they're not serious about trying to keep the government open. If they were, they would have supported these common sense policies, and instead they would rather play politics. Mr. Speaker, what we are actually debating today are common sense measures in this rule to strengthen American energy policy, to keep violent crime off our streets here in our capital cities, and these bills are about lowering costs for working families, keeping our communities safe, and restoring accountability. We're getting the job done with or without their support, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I'm confused by what the gentleman said. I don't know whether he supports the ACA tax credits or not. If he doesn't, then 6,000 of his constituents will be adversely impacted. If he does, then we should just, fix it right now. And by the way, Republicans all opposed the ACA when it came up, so I don't want to hear that garbage. And don't blame the Senate. Donald Trump has just said, to the Republicans over in the Senate, do it on your own. And I think what he's referring to is just last week, Republicans nuked the filibuster when it comes to nominations. So you control the House, you control the Senate, and you control the White House. And basically what you are telling us is that you don't give a damn about working families in this country. And that's what's at stake here. And I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Doggett.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. This rule further erodes the system of checks and balances that has served our democracy so well. Republicans, through it, are surrendering more and more unrestrained power to President Trump. This rule is but another step on the march to tyranny. Trump is seeking to create a master file of information on every single American, a digital ID tracking your movements, where you live, where you work, when you see a doctor, how much money you have, even child support agreements, and much more. Today, Republicans are simply rubber stamping that plan, the very kind of surveillance and intrusion that libertarians have always opposed. Today, these Republicans are blocking us from presenting any resolution of inquiry concerning the Trump administration, like the one that I introduced on June the 11th, to demand the facts from the administration about all of its wrongdoing, including what confidential information it has accumulated on each American. Your data becomes fully public and available to President Trump, even as the Epstein files remain fully buried. Republicans are keeping the American people ignorant of what Trump is doing with their private data, ignorant of how he may use it against his political enemies or his business competitors, ignorant of what he may do if you've ever expressed any criticism of him, his family, his policies, or maybe you just expressed support for someone that with his latest whim he is opposed to. Now he will have a master file that includes you to persecute and even prosecute. Too intimidated by this self-proclaimed king, Republicans are empowering what could become a police state. To shed light on this descent into authoritarian darkness, to let the American people know how their own government is centralizing their personal data, I introduced a resolution of inquiry demanding that the administration produce all the information related to the creation of this vast searchable database with its hand-picked contractor, Palantir, a company that one Silicon Valley executive accused of building the infrastructure of the police state. I do agree with one Republican, Representative Warren Davidson, who does believe in freedom and has described Trump's deal with Palantir as dangerous, and has said when you start combining all these data points on individuals into one database, it really essentially creates a digital ID, and it's a power that history says will eventually be abused, and with this administration eventually will be very soon. A vote for this rule is a vote to bury the truth and allow the federal government to track Americans and invade their privacy with no restraint. I strongly urge my colleagues to stand up for freedom and reject this rule, and I yield back.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, my colleagues across the aisle, they want to pretend Republicans are manufacturing a crime crisis in our nation's capital, but the facts tell a completely different story. Under President Biden and Democratic leadership, Washington, D.C. became one of the most dangerous cities in America. In 2023, D.C. had the fourth highest homicide rate in the nation, trailing only New Orleans, St. Louis, and Detroit. If D.C. were a state, it would have had the highest homicide rate in America. And that number could be even higher, because as we know, what D.C. officials, that they may have manipulated the crime data to hide the true extent of the problem. Democrats would rather fudge the numbers to justify their radical policy experiments in places like D.C. than actually protect communities from violent crime. You know, that same thing is happening in my home state of New York. They would rather quibble over process arguments and gaslighting using false statistics than acknowledge how many lives have been saved since President Trump took action to enforce law and order in the streets of Washington. This is how unserious and radical today's Democratic Party has become. Contrast this to what's happened since President Trump stepped in. In the 20 days following the federal surge, carjackings dropped 87% compared to the same period last year. Across the board, violent crime fell 39%. Burglaries dropped 45%, and carjackings fell 75%. More than 2,700 arrests were made and 320 firearms were recovered. These aren't talking points. They're results. They're real safety improvements felt by families here in the District of Columbia. While Democrats scramble to defend their failed policies in liberal experiments in America's major cities, and they downplay the true cost in lives that come from policies that have long been supported in these cities, Republicans are restoring accountability, enforcing the law, and delivering real results to make our community safer. And that's exactly what this rule is about. The legislation before us strengthens accountability here in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. It should be the gem of the country, and it will be again. If Democrats are truly serious about protecting families, they should support this rule and all of the underlying legislation, which is common sense, to support law and order and protect the lives of the residents and the visitors to this great city. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, you got to love these Republicans. They spend more time talking about micromanaging 0.2% of the American population in D.C., and more worried about that than they are worried about the fact that over 99% of the American people are about to see their premiums go up. Millions of people are going to lose their health care. I mean, we just have a different set of priorities. We have a different set of priorities. And by the way, health care is, when we talk about national security, health care is part of it. You don't have health care, you don't have security. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from New Mexico, a distinguished member of the Rules Committee, Ms. Ledger Fernandez.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, when Republicans vote in favor of today's rule, they will be voting in favor of higher coffee prices, higher car prices, higher prices for car seats and strollers. Republicans will be voting for inflation. They buried a provision in today's rule which prevents the House from voting or even debating Trump's tariffs. Trump imposed a 50% tariff on Brazil because he didn't like the fact that that sovereign country was prosecuting a former president for staging a violent coup. Now, Republicans are making you pay for Trump's protection of that convicted president in Brazil every time you buy coffee. That tariff doesn't serve any economic purpose, but thanks to Trump's tariffs, Americans across the country are already paying more for their coffee, whether they drink Folgers or the Pinon coffee we love at the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta. The Constitution says Congress should levy taxes and tariffs, but Republicans don't have the courage to stand up to Trump, to stand up for their constituents, the constituents who are taking food out of their grocery carts because grocery inflation is back. Remember, consumers pay for the tariffs, not foreign countries. So don't brag about how much has been collected for tariffs, because that is money that has essentially been taken away from American families. So I hope my Republican colleagues realize what they're doing to Americans' working families and stop this madness. You can't hide behind this rule and say, you didn't vote on the tariffs. You have been warned. You should know what you are doing when you come and vote for this rule. Because when you vote for this rule, you are voting to continue Trump's tarifflation. Vote against tarifflation. Vote against this rule.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the authors of inflation, the creators of inflation on the other side of this chamber, the people that hypercharged an economy and drove down the value of our dollar are now going to lecture us on why groceries cost so much. Where the hell have they been for the last 4 years? Where were they when Americans were struggling with the cost of their groceries because gas was up near $4 a gallon? Their policies determined that when they ran all facets of the government. And now they have this revisionist history and they want to talk about a cup of coffee. The tariff negotiations that President Trump has used have created new deals in new markets for our products around the globe. It's making a more competitive America, and we are not going to be taken advantage of by other countries anymore. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, Republicans are blocking a vote on Trump's tariffs in this rule, and I think it's pretty obvious why. The consequences of his economic policy are being felt in communities across this country, and Republicans know they can't defend it. That's why they're not doing town halls. Moms and dads are coming home with pink slips because their employers don't know if they can keep the doors open. Small businesses are shuttering. Farmers are struggling under higher input costs and shrinking markets. Food, gas, electricity, basic goods and services, prices are all up, and they're likely to climb even higher as Trump's tariffs ripple through the supply chain. It is clear that the Trump economy is not working for average Americans. President Trump and Republicans promised to reduce inflation. Instead, last month we saw the largest monthly increase in inflation since January. They promised to reduce grocery prices. Instead, last month grocery prices spiked at the fastest pace in 3 years, driven in part by tariff-fueled costs. They promised to cut electricity prices in half. Instead, August electricity prices were 6% higher than they were a year ago. And Americans are having to navigate a weakening job market and rising costs. Fruits and vegetables are up nearly 2%. Dairy products are up 1.3%. Cereal and bread are up 1.1%. And meat, poultry, fish, and eggs are all up a whopping 5.6%. Give me a break. Mr. Speaker, let's be frank. The only winners in Trump's economy are millionaires and billionaires. He packed his cabinet with the rich and well-connected. Republicans' reconciliation bill hands out nearly $100,000 in tax cuts for those making over $1 million a year in 2027 alone. And just last week, the Trump administration started rolling back efforts to crack down on offshore tax shelters that billionaires and giant corporations use to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. Like, who does that? Mr. Speaker, Trump promised an economy for the American people, but time and time again, his tariffs and his policies have only delivered for the ultra-rich, while families and farmers and small businesses pay the price. We ought to be voting on this stuff. I reserve my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Again, more and more class warfare, Mr. Speaker. I mean, we hear the term millionaires and billionaires thrown around. Yet every single one of them voted against all of the tax benefits that would have helped the middle class and will continue to help the middle class. They voted against no tax on tips. They voted against no tax on overtime. They voted against doubling the child tax credit. They voted against doubling the standard deduction. All things that put serious money back into the pockets of my constituents. Now, my colleague, $1,800, $2,000, $2,500 might not seem like a lot to him. But it might be 2 mortgage payments to my constituents. Yet every single one of them voted no. So I will not be lectured, and none of us should be lectured, by people that stood in the way of getting that tax code made permanent. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Is the gentleman talking about the reconciliation bill that the Republicans brought to the floor that resulted in trillions and trillions of dollars and more debt, all to give multimillionaires and multi-billionaires a tax cut? I mean, I'm sorry. If there's class warfare going on here, I know what side my Republican friends are on. Mr. Speaker, millions of everyday Americans all across the country are about to get notice that their health care premiums are going to skyrocket, including in the gentleman's district. Moms and dads and grandparents, people working 2 jobs just to get by, are going to be at their kitchen tables facing the awful decision of which bills to pay. And for nearly 24 million people in this country who have ACA marketplace health insurance, premiums will increase on average 93%. A 60-year-old couple making $80,000 per year will see their premiums increase over $17,000 per year. That's like $1,400 per month. A family of 4 earning $64,000 will owe an extra $2,600 in health care premiums every year. Where on earth are families supposed to find this kind of extra money, Mr. Speaker? We're talking hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars. That's not extra change that you can find in your couch cushion. It will mean 5 million people, including 2 million with chronic conditions, lose their health care coverage altogether. It will mean older adults have to choose between paying their high energy bills or affording their health care. It will mean families going without food because their health care premiums are unaffordable. It will mean people fall behind on their rent just so they can afford basic health care. In the United States of America, the richest country in the history of the world, this is a crisis, Mr. Speaker. It is a crisis of the Republicans' own making. Instead of spending the summer working with Democrats to address this looming health care cliff, Republicans spent it instead slashing Medicaid by $1 trillion, kicking 15 million people off their coverage altogether, blocking access to cancer screening and prenatal care by defunding Planned Parenthood, cutting NIH's budget, taking food away from families with teenagers, veterans, and older adults, which will make them less healthy, all to give tax breaks to Elon Musk and Trump's billionaire friends. Honest to God, Mr. Speaker, I have no idea what to say to the working families who visit my office scared to death that their health care costs are going to force them to go broke. I don't know how my Republican friends can talk to people back home in their districts, regular people, hardworking people, and somehow justify what they're doing. I guess many of them don't because they don't do town halls. And with all due respect to the Speaker of the House, no, this actually cannot wait. I understand why you're trying to minimize the crisis that you created. I really do. But hardworking people back home are counting on us, Mr. Speaker. Congress must address this looming health care crisis now, including one of the most significant health care premium hikes in history and the historic cuts to Medicaid that are closing hospitals and nursing homes on a daily basis, to give families peace of mind that they won't go bankrupt trying to afford their health care. I reserve.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I reserve.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
How much time do I have left, Mr. Speaker?
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. I'm losing my voice, but not my passion. Mr. Speaker, the truth is simple. Families are being crushed by high prices, rent, groceries, gas, health care, all going up. And what are Republicans doing? They're obsessed with micromanaging Washington, D.C. Not one, not two, not three, but 4 different bills today about Washington, D.C. Now, I hate to break it to the Republicans, but none of the people that I represent, and I think none of the people from the gentleman's district, live in Washington, D.C., which leads me to wonder why the hell are Republicans wasting time on this nonsense? And the other bills that we're dealing with here, favors to big coal and big oil, again, nothing for regular families from these guys, nothing for average Americans. They have no vision, no plan for economic growth. I mean, the bottom line is health care premiums about to go through the roof, and people are going to see their health care bills explode because these guys refuse to act. Republicans are putting ideology over everyday people. They're putting headlines over solutions. They are playing games instead of governing. All of this, micromanaging D.C., the coal commission garbage, is what Republicans are focused on while the government teeters on the edge of a shutdown. While Trump's tariffs drive up prices and why millions of people are about to get kicked off their health insurance. I urge a no vote, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm prepared to close, and I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman's recognized.
For far too long, Americans have been forced to endure higher costs, weaker energy security, and rising crime because of policies pushed by the left. The American people rejected that approach last November, and they elected a president and a Congress committed to restoring accountability, protecting families, and ensuring our future is built on reliable, affordable American energy. The measures in this rule fulfill that promise. They strengthen our grid, they cut through bureaucratic red tape, and they make sure America, not China, leads in powering the next generation. They also hold the line on public safety by rolling back soft on-crime policies here in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., and restore the accountability that local leaders have refused to enforce. Mr. Speaker, I strongly support the rule before us today and the underlying legislation. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Yes, your gentleman's recognized.
I ask for the yeas and nays, preferably the nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess for a period of less than 15 minutes.